And in a way, we've come full circle. The title of our first TexFLEC was TexFLEC. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. My predecessor and mentor, Dr. John Bordy, spoke of the history of foreign language education on the University of Texas campus. I spoke about what was happening at that moment. And our colleague and illustrious alumna, who does Latin? Is that the feminine? Alumni? Okay, thank you. Anna Chameau spoke about the future of foreign language education. Today's theme, we come back to the future of foreign language education. Welcome to the classroom of tomorrow, forging the future of foreign language education. But in the first TexFLEC, we speculated on the future of foreign language education. Today and tomorrow, in the 13th, lucky 13th TexFLEC, we will speak about the actual future of foreign language education. We will forge the future and say what we need to do to make it happen. Our topics for the next 2 days are impressive, including language policy, which sets the goals for language education of the future, language assessment, innovative teaching practices. Particularly, I've been impressed, if you look at the program, innovative programs for specific language learning and teaching context. And of course, we will have presentations on technology, a term that some people see as almost synonymous with the future of foreign language education. Our two keynote speakers, Professor Carl Blyth, who I'll talk about in a minute, and his talk, Opening Up Foreign Language Education, and Professor B. Kumara Vadivelu, and his talk, Forging the Future of Language Education, Transforming the Teacher Itself. I promised you I'd butcher your name, and I've fulfilled my promise on that. Are on the cutting edge of the profession's discussion of where we need to be, and more importantly, how do we get there? As some of you may know, TexFLEC was the vision of then FLE PhD student E.G. Kim Rivera. I was actually fortunate to see E.G. this summer and have a long visit with her while I was in Korea in August. I'm simply proud to say this, that TexFLEC remains today a student-led, student-conceptualized, and student-centered conference. People who know me know that I believe that you can never applaud too much or too often, so let's be sure to applaud right now for this year's organizers, Minjung Choi, Amy Joseph, Shilpa Paranami, and Jennifer Slogan. I believe and hope that was in alphabetical order by last name. TexFLEC is now co-organized by our language education students here at UT and those at UT San Antonio. I should have turned the page first. We'll do more clapping. And I want to particularly thank Ms. Swoyan and our colleagues Shannon Sorrow and Francis Holt of UTSA. And of course, I need to acknowledge the support and help of Tom Garza of the Texas Language Center, Mike Smith of UT-ESL Services, and Carl Blyth of Toronto. I thought it was especially important to acknowledge these supporting programs now because I thought it was unlikely that Tom Garza would acknowledge himself. Those are ones. The other important change in the leadership of TexFLEC since the first TexFLEC conference, I guess 13 years ago, is the integral involvement, really ownership, of our MA students In previous years, TexFLEC was a PhD enterprise. Now it is often an MA and PhD enterprise, or even an MA enterprise. So thank you, MA students. So that is the end of my introductory remarks, and I will move on to my introduction of my colleague Carl Blyth. But first, a reminder, there's coffee next door. As many of you know, I am fond of saying that I believe that UT Austin has the strongest faculty in foreign language education in the world. And one important reason for my assessment is my colleague, Professor Carl Blyth. Carl is Associate Professor of French Linguistics here and Director of CORAL, the Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning, one of 15 federally funded foreign language resource centers. He earned his BA and MA from the University of North Carolina and his PhD from Cornell University. Most of you know Cornell's reputation in theory, but I also have a personal connection to Cornell's language reputation. Some years ago, my family with my son took the prospective student tour at Cornell, and the person who was recruiting students said proudly, "Here at Cornell, we teach 90 different languages." And then she said, "I bet there's no one in the audience who can name 90 languages." I think I might be able to. So Cornell has certainly been a leader and a role model in language education in the country. Some of you have also heard me speak in second language acquisition class about Professor Blyth's suggestion, more than a suggestion, imperative, that we look to functioning bilinguals within a culture rather than monolingual natives as our goal for students. His French videos actually feature Americans speaking French so that there are real role models for our language learners. Finally, I want to mention the mission of CORAL. Electronic digital media will make it easier for would-be language learners to skip formal language classes. So our dilemma then is, our choice is, do we leave these learners to Rosetta Stone and sites they happen upon randomly on the internet? CORAL says no. We provide engaging, professional, state-of-the-art materials to anyone who wants them. I can think of no better topic for the future than opening up foreign language education. My colleague and friend, Professor Carl Blyth.
Elaine told me just before she took the podium that she's very bad at all the things in her professional life. This is the worst thing. She hates doing introductions, but I thought she was actually very good at that. Thank you very much for that gracious introduction. I'm very excited to be here, and Elaine already got it plugged in for CORAL. That's how we were pronouncing it. CORAL. But you can pronounce it any way you want to. Right, you say it right, but you can say that I'm all about language variation. So CORAL, Coral, you're from Texas, it doesn't matter. I do want to bring your attention to our logo, which I think is really, really cool. Natalie, are you here? There's Natalie. We have a designer. Oh, they're right in the back. I have my team, my posse here. She came up with this logo, which is actually an acronym within an acronym that I'll be talking a lot about today. OERs, Open Educational Resources, and that's the center, literally the center of CORAL, because we're all about the production of OERs, Open Educational Resources. Okay, so to start with, let me say, I noticed on the web a couple weeks ago when I was preparing this talk that you had a list of bullet points, a very ambitious list of bullet points you wanted to touch on to help the speakers, including me. We're going to be discussing over the next day and a half hybrid classes in online learning, and I went, check, I'm going to be doing that. Instructional technology resources, I mentioned that we are all about open educational resources, so we'll talk about materials in terms of resources, we'll rename them. But textbooks and databases, they're now resources and tools for learning. Check. Language learner factors such as autonomy, you had others, but I'm going to focus on autonomy because these tools, I think, help our students, help people, help teachers to become more autonomous. The effect of globalization on language learning, I'm going to be talking about the internet that has a connection with globalization. Teacher and learner identity in these new online sites. Identity is much more fluid, so the social roles of teacher and learner are interchanged. So teachers can become learners and learners can become teachers. Social and cultural, so check. That was their social and cultural context. Yes, we'll be talking about that. The internet has given us all kinds of new social context online for interacting with other people. Check. And policies and budgetary constraints on education. Economics is driving everything right now, and so you can't talk about opening up education without talking about the budgetary constraints that keep things closed. So I think I'm going to hit all those. I'm going to have to go quickly. So how many of you have heard of the term open education? Okay, I gave a talk on Monday, it's Friday, so bookends of the week, to Region 13. Texas is divided into 20 regions. Region 13 is here in Central Texas, so Austin, if you go from a radius about 75 miles all the way around Austin, all the independent school districts formed then Region 13. And we were at the conference center for Region 13, and that was the question that I posed to foreign language teachers who are in the field now working in primarily middle school and high school. We had about the same group of people, and only one hand went up. Okay? We had in October the Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning. That's a mouthful. I'll just say CORAL from now on. We had something called the Open Language Summit, and we invited all of the directors from the other 15 national resource centers around the country, from Hawaii to New York to everywhere, right, to come here and talk about the impact of open education on their practices. And we started off with the same question. How many of them had heard of open education? And these are, an elite group of people. We had just a handful of hands that went up. So you are way ahead of the curve. Yeah. Okay. So by the end of this talk, you'll all be able to raise your hand and know what open education is. But here I've given you where you go. Wikipedia, of course. Open education is a collective term that refers to forms of education in which knowledge, ideas, or important aspects of teaching methodology or infrastructure are shared freely over the internet. It's inspired by related concepts like Creative Commons, open source, open data, and open access, and expands them to include lectures and other courseware. I like to quote Rich Baranick, who is a computer scientist and an electrical engineer at Rice University, but more importantly, he is truly an educational visionary, and he is the founder and CEO of Connections.org, and I'll be talking more about that. But he says, open education is based on a set of intuitions that are shared by a remarkably wide range of academics. That knowledge should be free and open to use and reuse. I want you to steal my ideas today, and I want you to reuse them. Because that's what I've done. I've stolen lots of Rich's ideas for this talk. That collaboration should be easier, not harder. And we find that collaboration in educational systems is often quite difficult. It's really hard here at the University of Texas to be collaborative. I'll talk about that in a minute. That people should receive credit and kudos for contributing to education and research. Don't steal, just borrow, and then say you got it from me. And that's all I ask. And that concepts and ideas are linked in unusual and surprising ways and not the simple linear forms that traditional media present. Okay, so Using and reusing, that's borrowed from his talk there, his citation. So this talk is actually a mashup. You've heard of mashup? Right? So I'm borrowing bits and pieces. In fact, I've actually taken people's PowerPoints, right, because they're available and they're open, and I've asked permission. Rich Baranick, a talk that he gave, Disruptive Educational Innovation, here at the University of Texas in October. All these will be available to you if you go through the Coral site, and I'll show you at the end of the talk. As well as Susie Henderson, a great talk. She's now the Director of Digital Design at EDUCAUSE, solving the open textbook puzzle. So I'm borrowing liberally, and I'm reusing their knowledge. So let me start with the problem. Curriculum development, or materials development, that's one of the things that's central to the mission of Coral. We develop open educational resources. And the commercial educational industry is fairly inefficient. I wrote a textbook with I will not name the publishing company. It took 6 years to get the book to market. And it was slow because we focus grouped it to death, and we went through 3 different editors, and it's an inefficient process. That's not to say that commercial publishers don't add value to products. They do. I'm not here just to bash commercial publishing companies, because we actually feel like at Coral we're filling a gap that's left unfilled by commercial publishers. But it's slow. And another problem in all educational systems is that we reside in these silos. We talk a lot about it here at the University of Texas. For example, Elaine just introduced me as professor in the French and Italian department, and I rarely see my colleagues in foreign language education because I have to cross the street. But crossing the street, we're not only are we in different programs, but we're in different colleges, and that is really difficult. That's another street to cross. And so even though we have this discipline that's called foreign language education, we reside in these silos, and they create boundaries. Okay. Oops, I forgot one thing at the bottom here. There's another wall that I'll be talking a lot about, and that's poor access to high-quality materials. Increasingly, at all levels of education, it is harder for students to get into higher education, but also to get their hands on quality materials because they're becoming expensive. So this is taken from Rich Baranick's talk, and he said, this is our model of education. We have the factory. It's pretty depressing, doesn't it? And you've taught in that building, have you? Okay. So the main idea behind this, to use more of a technical term, is aggregation, right? So you put things together in a group. And these happy people up at the front, they don't know they're going into that factory, but they're the people who are going through the factory. And we can think about peer groups, learning materials, teaching practices, mentoring, advising, testing, feedback, credentialing. These are the processes of educational systems. And the University of Texas wants to have that as a fairly closed system. Okay? And at the end, we spit out the graduates, if we're lucky, and they're still smiling at the end. Okay? Another way of thinking about what I'm going to talk to you today about is disaggregating, pulling all of those things apart, and maybe letting people put them back together in different ways that they feel are more productive for them. So freeing learning materials and peer groups and advising and so forth, and opening it up to the web. Okay, so the big idea is really that knowledge forms a network. And here I borrowed this slide from Rich, because Rich Baranick is a computer scientist, and he had things like signal processing and things that I didn't know anything about, artificial intelligence. That's not my knowledge network. But this represents something. If you're a foreign language teacher, you take courses in linguistics, you know about the linguistic formal properties, right, of what you're talking about. That helps you teach the language. You have to know, obviously, about sociolinguistics, another knowledge area, because obviously it's not just forms. It's you want to be able to talk to real people, and that then takes you to social context. So that takes you to appropriacy rules and so forth. Psycholinguistics would be very helpful. Okay, and I see Diane Schallert back there. She's waving to me. So some of you take courses with Diane. You need to know about things like attentional resources and cognitive principles like memory. That's very important for learning. And of course, I'll be talking also about instruction design. Now, as I said, a network, knowledge forms a network, and so do people. We're used to talking about social networks. Okay, so I wish I could have more contact with Diane and Elaine, but we are in this large system, and so we're spread apart. But the important point here is that all of these fields of knowledge are connected with people. And if we could bring people into contact, of course, then we can exploit new forms of knowledge and produce new forms of knowledge. And that brings me to the point of open standards for networks of knowledge. We want to have people interacting more freely, and we want to make sure that we take down as many barriers as we can to those interactions, those productive interactions where people share their knowledge and they create knowledge. So this is a metaphor, a grand metaphor of connection, right? And this makes a lot of sense for computer programmers and people on the internet. But here's another metaphor, a prettier metaphor. And it's also a metaphor that people are talking about all the time now, and that is, of course, ecology. So ecological approaches to language. Languages are systems that are dynamic. They're constantly changing. They have pressures from the inside and from the outside. Linguists talk about them as systems of systems because you can talk about the phonological system and the syntactic system and the pragmatic system, and they're all interacting and they're all changing. So we can talk, the whole point of moving from networks to something like this is it's really about living things, because we are living things. We talk about languages, but maybe we should shift our focus to people. And if you look at this little, I don't know, you've seen Not Finding Nemo? Okay, I don't know what kind of a fish that is, but it's a beautiful Finding Nemo type fish. It inhabits a very specific part of the ecosystem. And it is in this kind of symbiotic relationship with this other living organism, and you get the point. Okay, so the metaphor seems to work very nicely for thinking, conceptualizing what we're doing as language teachers, because it's a nested system. You have a classroom within a school district, within now a region 13, within this TEA, Texas Educational, and so forth, right? Okay, so let me get to finally the meat of the talk is OER. What's that? Well, apparently a third of you already kind of know what an OER is, Open Educational Resource. So what is that? Susie Henderson, and these are taken from Susie Henderson's talk. Before she went to EDUCAUSE, she was the director of the Orange Grove, which was a state, Orange Grove, Florida. It's a statewide archive for open textbooks. And they joined forces with all the universities and the University of Florida Press to produce open textbooks. So let me show you familiar. She asked the question over down here, the number of faculty members who participated in this was 2,685. So these are professors at public institutions, universities, colleges, and universities. And so the question was, are you familiar with open textbooks? 52% said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Somewhat familiar, that's 40%, but that's a wide range. You probably should ask some more granular questions there, because that meant, somewhat, I think I've heard of that, which means no, they haven't. To, I've used it, yeah, so I'm somewhat familiar. To very familiar, 7.3%. Okay, so this is a new idea. We're talking about the future, but I also think that this idea is about to go big, to go viral. Another question he asked, have you used open access materials? Open access materials are simply those on the web that you can access. You don't have the right then to take them apart, make profit on them, but you can just access and use them. And roughly about 11% of post-secondary professors said, yes, I've used them in some form. So still, this has not penetrated the market. This is still not on a lot of people's radar screens. But importantly, they say they've used it as supplementary material. So we're still using a textbook, and then they'll plug the holes of the textbook and use OERs. So they also did, again, the number was 2,700, and they asked them, they just talked a little bit about materials. What's keeping you from embracing these materials? And they had these worries, the top 10. So some of them, I can't believe this, they were actually worried about the impact of the bookstore. I don't particularly care that much about the impact. Well, anyway. Recognition of efforts towards innovation. I'm going to go through the top ones that are important. Support from the administration, and that's true. We get mixed messages from here at UTBC, the tower, to refer to the administration. So there's a lot of ambivalence about open education. Okay? Availability of materials. Well, okay, I can access the internet right now, and I'm thinking that too because I'm on wireless, and I'm hoping the rest of this talk will go okay. But if it crashes, I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay? Environmental concerns, yes, because we want to be a paperless university. Hard, but you notice that the numbers, this is a scale from 1, the lowest, to 3. So now we're getting into 2.55. Worry about hardware and software. I don't know if my computer will work in a classroom. Desire to reduce costs to students. So this is a very big, but the professors are saying 2.6. Textbooks are expensive now. For foreign languages, they're around $200, and it comes bundled with a package. That's expensive. Knowledge about these materials. I don't know. I'm a neophyte, so therefore I'm not. I mean, I know what a textbook is. I don't know what an OER is. Here, near up at the top, I just don't have the time. That's the refrain that most teachers say. I'm too busy. I can't review them all because there's actually a plethora. There's a lot of stuff out there, so we'll talk about that. And finally, the number 1, academic quality. People are really worried, are these any good? Because they're not published by a big publishing company. I trust McGraw-Hill. I trust Prentice Hall. I don't know why, but okay. Florida, so they also, not only did they look at the faculty, but also students. And here the numbers are huge. They have 14,000 students. This was 2 years ago. Students overwhelmingly said, let me choose. Okay, that's the takeaway. They want to choose how they want to interact with the materials, and 70% of them said they want both. They want print textbooks and digital. Okay, so it's not either or, it's everything. And just to run through this, what measures have you taken to reduce your textbook costs? Now, these are students. What have you done? Because we realize it's expensive. I buy used or new textbooks online. I go to Amazon or find better competitors for Amazon. I don't buy from the bookstore because they mark it up. I buy used textbooks when I can. I sell my used textbooks. I share. My roommate and I buy our books together. And here, 37% said, I just don't purchase the book. 37%, which is a remarkable. So that's the main takeaway here. A lot of students are not actually buying the materials, and I can vouch for that. I teach here at the University of Texas, and I don't know how they expect to take a language course without a textbook, but many of them do. Then they ask them, so what are the most important features of these new kinds of textbooks? They like, at the top there, they like the ability to search. That's good. They wanted more time available. If you buy an e-textbook, you typically rent it for a certain amount of time, and then it disappears at the end of the semester. They wanted it a little bit longer. They want the ability to print textbooks. We still want print. I like to have the printed copy for a lot of different reasons. Cognitive reasons. I know where I am in the text, and I get lost in digital text very easily, and then I can't recall where I am in the text. The page numbers, and I can put my finger in it. There are a lot of reasons why we've trained our minds to think with the cognitive tool of print. They want then, so that's about 40, 50, 60%, and then dropping down, we have another group. They want to do highlighting text and copying and pasting, all the kinds of things that you do with word processing. And still, bound copy. I want something that also looks like 26% said I want a bound copy. Okay. But here's the biggie. the cost required textbooks has caused me to, and here we have, this column is frequently and occasionally and seldom or never. You can see it's caused me to not register a course. So if you put the two, frequently and occasionally, together, that's a quarter of our students are saying, I look at the price of books and say, no thank you. Okay? And then I want to bring your attention to the last one. I just don't purchase the textbook. It's another way of asking the question. 21% said frequently they don't purchase the textbook. It's too expensive. Occasionally, so we're up to 50% of students admit to not buying materials. So budgetary constraints, yes. Okay, so I think that commercially produced print materials are too expensive and we want to enable OERs. And there are two basic things that enable this. Is again, Rich Berenick, he loves Tinker Toys, he's an engineer. He loves Lego, so he's talking about the web and the internet and databases. These ideas that you can take modules and put them together easily. But a very important point is intellectual property rights. And there has been a huge change, and you should all know about this. There's something called Creative Commons, or 2 C's within the circle. All of you know about copyright, which is 1 C within the circle. And it's usually followed by the phrase, all rights reserved, which is this, right? Which is not an open system. Which means that you don't have access to any of the intellectual property rights. So what I am doing right now, if Rich Berenick and Susie Henderson had given their PowerPoint talks and said, all rights reserved and put a copyright, I couldn't do all of this stuff. I couldn't have used their materials. So down in the bottom we have a Creative Commons. This is an alternative copyright. Now some people are calling it a copyleft. And you have that all you have to say, this one is the most open license of all, which just says, look, you do whatever you want to with this textbook, but it says by and the person, that's me. Just give me some credit. Just say it's by the University of Texas. Don't take off the cover and claim it for your own. That's not nice. Okay? Steal my ideas, but give me credit. Okay, so then Creative Commons has disaggregated, pulled it apart, the notion of copyright. Because it really is attribution. Give me credit. Teachers want credit for what they do. You can also choose to say, look, I'm producing this for you, but I want you, if you produce materials, you share them with me. So you have to share alike. Let's play the same game. There's also, you can choose whether you will allow people, I'll go over here, to make derivative works. That is, I've made a textbook. Maybe you want to make a textbook. Maybe you look at mine and say, I can do it better. I say, fine, go right ahead. So you can build on my textbook. Some people say, no, I don't want you making any derivative works. Okay? And finally, non-commercial, some educators say, look, we don't make a lot of money. I don't want you making a lot of money off of my product. Non-commercial. Okay? Again, the French textbook that I'm going to be talking about in just a minute, we say, go ahead, you dare you to make money on this, right? So we have the most, all we say is attribution. You can do whatever you want to with it. It's totally open in that respect. Okay, so Creative Commons is key. So what is an open textbook? Well, it's really accessible, digital, online, no cost, all the things that are bold-faced, no cost, no cost, no cost. But number 2, in addition, students can often order a commercial or print-on-demand copy at a modest cost. So everything that we make available for Français Interactif and our other materials, right, we want them to access free of charge. You can download it electronically, electronic version, a digital version. But if you want to, you can go purchase this for a very low price of $25. Okay. And as the results just shows, students actually do want that. They just don't want to pay $200. Okay, so students are focused on cost. Let me go to the next slide, and this is for me to remind me to play the video, but I'm not going to have any time. Now, Flatworld knowledge, let me actually just show you. And here, let's see, Flatworld. Do I have Flatworld? I don't have Flatworld, so of course I'm not well prepared. Flatworld is a commercial publishing company that has actually, so flatworldknowledge.com, if you write it down and I take a look, they have hundreds of open textbooks that people can purchase. And it's fantastic because students and teachers can go in and change the textbooks. So a professor can say, I like this textbook, but I don't like that chapter. Delete. Or I want to add my own activities. They can add them right into the textbook. It's open. So it's a commercial publishing company. They're hoping to make some money on it, and it's just starting. But it's growing. And guess what? There are no foreign language textbooks on Flatworld Knowledge because Flatworld Knowledge was started by people in marketing and management, so in a business school. And if you look through there, and what I said was knowledge ecologies are also social networks. So all of these people who are producing all these fabulous materials in marketing all know each other, and they turn around and tell their friends, their colleagues, and they produce materials. If you go to the humanities, it's the desert. Okay? So it's an area that's available to hint. So now let me get to connections.org. This is Rich Baranick, and I invite you to go and take a look at this. Connections is a nonprofit platform founded at Rice 12 years ago. Basically, it's this huge archive of educational content, and it has grown exponentially. Now it's up to 1,100 open textbooks are becoming collections because they're online. You can take, it is true, there are modules that you can put together and then print them out yourself as a textbook. He calls them Lego modules. In 40 languages, and he has millions and millions of users per month, hits per month. It's huge. And here is an example from his collaborative statistics. Now, if you go to Connections, Rich Baranick is a computer scientist, electrical engineer. He has his own network, and it's very heavy on all the hard sciences, statistics. And again, here's what it looks like online. Here's over here the table of contents, and then of course the text or whatever it is. You can download this to your iPad or to your Android, and you can, if you want to, have a printed textbook. $26, 670 pages. That's pretty amazing. Okay. Now, part of the reason for opening things up is because they're what he calls unexpected consequences, unintended consequences, but sometimes they're really terrific. So he says, no, we should expect these consequences now. When you produce an open textbook and you give it away to the world, people say, well, you know, I want that in Spanish, or I want that in... The biggest user of Connections is the Vietnamese government. They have all kinds of these collections that are being translated into Vietnamese. So imagine what we can do if we open them up in foreign languages. So the main point here is, again, this is Rice University. I didn't have the time to put in UT, but that's Rice. But it works for UT very well. Because at UT, we have this slogan. What starts here changes the world. Okay, I know. It's Texas, so it ain't big around here. And the idea is that we have outreach. What starts here changes the world. We're giving our materials out to the world to change the world. But the big point of open education is in reach. It comes back to us and changes us in the process. We give materials away, and if teachers were to actually embrace them and change them, and we can all benefit. Sounds great? Sounds utopian. And it raises the question of quality control, because that in-reach could also be opening the floodgates to a lot of junk, right? So, and this was the number one, right, the worry of faculty members. Well, it sounds wonderful, but it's not vetted. Okay, back to the Great Barrier Reef. Ecosystems need diversity, so you're going to have to allow for a waste of time and resources. And I like, this is a quote, I've heard Rich Barrett say this again and again. If you knew nothing about the internet, we're trying to figure it out from data, we conclude it was designed for the transmission of spam and porn. Okay, so there's a lot of good stuff, there's a lot of really bad stuff. That goes with the notion of openness. You can't have it both. So the question is then, how do you strike the balance between quality and control? And we've been having these discussions at Coral. We want an open community of teachers and instructional designers and administrators, and we want this to be open, but at the same time, we need to have quality, which means some kind of peer review. What they do at Connections is they've adopted the metaphor of lens, and actually that's just their term, but it's all over the internet now, this notion of lens. This is a professional group of electrical engineers, an international group of electrical engineers, and they have a lens, an editorial team that goes through, sifts through the content, and puts their stamp, their seal of approval on material. So if you're looking for materials, you can find them and say, okay, this has been vetted. But you can have multiple lenses. You can have your Austin Independent School District. If they were to go and look at Coral, and we want to do that, so which materials do you give us for seal of approval? Will the Texas Education Agency give us their seal of approval? That's a lens too, according to the criteria that you make explicit. You can even have a personal lens because some people are great collectors right on the internet, and they can have then their own set of criteria. Okay. And he gives another example that of detections of signals and noise. We'll get into language in just a second. Detection of signals and noise. Again, another statistics. And over here we have, this has been endorsed by, you can click on that and it takes you to the organization. Okay. So let me jump ahead to our own exemplars, Français Interactif in Texas, Spanish in Texas. Okay, so I'm tired of looking at statistics in electrical engineering. Okay, so I'm now on the internet, and this is our website, Coral. And I want to show you how you can access. We don't have materials in 90 languages like Cornell or whatever. We have in 18 languages, I believe. That's not so bad. And let me just show you that from the list. Français Interactif, so we go down here. Okay. Now, that's the big point here, really, is to say that this is no longer a textbook or a curriculum. This is a community. And we have then a downloadable textbook. As I said, you go online and you go to a print-on-demand company that's called coop.com, which is right on the site. And this is essentially all the activities you do in a classroom. We have 3 hours of video content, audio content, and now we've just struck a deal with a commercial company that makes videos, and that have allowed us to use them for educational purposes. But the important point is, what I would say is, let's see if I can go here. Find my way around. Oops. I can't find it. Here we go. Like us on Facebook. So, okay, well, it's too big to show. But if you go, well, let me just try. James Smith writes in, Robert Wosop writes in, and they're writing, he's from, I just checked this last night, he's from Kampala, Uganda, and he had a question. All kinds of people are writing in. Who are these people? Most of them are, we call them users. We don't call them learners and students. They're all users because, as you see in the interactions here, around these materials, people start to ask questions. But who the learner is and who the teacher is really is not, I don't think, the most productive way to think about it because it keeps shifting their roles. A lot of people just writing to say thank you. People from Louisiana, it was Mardi Gras on Tuesday, Fat Tuesday, they wrote in. Isabelle Michaud probably is from Canada because she's saying it's snowing wherever I am. But okay, I wanted to find somebody named Rainbow Pun. Rainbow Pun, okay. she writes in and says, can you give me some more examples of phrases that use the conditional? Okay, typical question. And Mr. Fonseca writes back, because we have moderators and different people write back and say, sure. But instead of pointing them to our site, we say there are lots of sites out there. So here you can go to this site, which has exercises, or other sites. Okay. So I think you get the point. Let me go back to Français Interactif then. Elaine actually set this up fairly nicely, so I won't have to go into a lot of detail. We are now in, I guess, like the 9th year of Français Interactif, and it keeps on growing. We have millions of hits on this. We had no idea that it would kind of reach this proportion. And people are using it in many different ways that we had never imagined, as notions of unintended consequences. So a couple of weeks I was following an interaction between a hotel school in Geneva, Switzerland, that was using our site, and a lot of the examples are from Texas. And we have videos of Texans going to France, but they said, well, you know, this makes a lot of sense because we deal with foreigners all the time, so we deal with bad French all the time. They don't have a problem with the notion that commercial publishing companies really do. So the idea of trying to show in our materials this progression of proficiency progression makes a lot of sense to them. So here's an idea that I haven't been able to give away to commercial publishing, but the internet seems to understand. So that's fun. Okay, let me go back to Coral and take you to another project that I'm really excited about. Let's go down here. Spanish in Texas. Now, this is a little bit different, and I was talking about this project to the teachers on Monday, and they got really excited about this. This is essentially a sociolinguistic project, and as I was saying, you know, that knowledge ecology, we have sociolinguists working with instructional technologies makes a lot of sense. Because most textbooks present an imagined language, as we all know, right? So there's not a lot of variation, and they're terribly worried about bad Spanish and getting into the problematics of the notion of bad Spanish. So this project is actually the brainchild of two sociolinguists here on our campus, and let's see, Barbara Bullock, who's a colleague of mine in the French department, who works on languages in contact, and Jacques Toribio, who's the sociolinguist in the Spanish department. And basically they have deputized their heritage undergraduate speakers, and they're going out to 4 different places in Texas, El Paso in the west, and Valley in the south, Houston, and the Metroplex Dallas area, and they're conducting sociolinguistic interviews. And we have these videos then of these interviews. We already have 50 of them transcribed, so hours and hours and hours of data. So let me just show you what some of them look like. Okay.
Entonces ya pues iba a mi clase, se lo da a mis maestros, y pues ya iba a todas mis clases y luego ya seguía lonche, y luego ya pues esperaban a Julie que llegara, siempre la esperaban en la librería.
So, okay, that's all I need to show you, just to show you that there are these real speakers. And she's using librería, she just said the word, which should have been in English, Spanish, biblioteca, because she's talking about the library, but she's using a word that would have meant bookstore in Castilian Spanish. And so, but that's okay, we're representing. And as I was showing these materials, a teacher told me, again, from the area, she said, oh, this would have really helped me because I teach out of a textbook, and of course, it's a very standardized book. And I'll never forget one of my first week as a teacher of Spanish, I had a student who came up to me and said, you know, my mom says you're wrong. Because we don't say it like that. And he said it was like that for the rest. So they all said, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. So this is what we're trying to figure out. How do we deal with variation, linguistic variation, and authenticity, authentic materials, which still remains a problem. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, but this is a huge corpus. So sociolinguists are partnering now with educators and bilingual educators, and we're asking teachers, okay, we have these great materials, and we're also doing them on with children. So in other words, sociolinguistics looks at all the demographics. So we have children, we have adolescents, we have middle-aged people, we have old people without teeth. And then we have them in different regions. So we're trying to show Spanish as a living language. Great content, what do you do with it? And the sociolinguist said, I don't know, we need to partner with people who are professionals in foreign language ed. So we're creating a collaborative team. And all this is leading up to, we're having a seminar or a workshop this summer. Any of you who teach Spanish, please come to our workshop because we want to create a knowledge ecology of different people from different perspectives. Instructional designers, administrators who will let us do this in the public schools, teachers, and then sociolinguists. Okay, so let me go back to my talk. Learner autonomy. Okay, well, go back to the factory. Openness is going to disrupt the whole enterprise because we can kind of individualize and personalize for the first time. And I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, but we can certainly have, the problem has been a lack of diversity in our materials, one size fits all, but now we have lots of people contributing, right, in a way that makes sense. Still with peer review, have quality, we can diversify our materials so that we can then send people to different parts of the ecology. And this is something that we haven't really done, but Rich Berenick, as a computer scientist, is looking through. Automated feedback systems have been very fragile, but now there's something called learner analytics. Google does this to you, Amazon does this to you. When I go to Amazon, they say, hi Carl, and they have books on sociolinguistics and French linguistics, and they know who I am. They know who I am because they're using their analytics on it. So we can then put those two together, rich materials, which are database, with learner analytics to finally start to produce personalized learning systems. Okay, so let me jump through. The future, where are we going? That sounds a little grandiose. People who talk about the internet, they don't know where they're going. But let me tell you, a couple of things that we're having discussions about in Coral right now. And Rachel's over there, you can keep me honest. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about, here is a Creative Commons license, an open license. We have different materials. So here's a textbook in French. I said it's totally open. Rip it apart, do what you want to with it, try to make a profit. We have TexFLEC, which is also print on demand. We also have a site, a first-year German site, but it's not as open because the professors involved, the various people involved, weren't quite sure because they're newer to the open world, and they're not quite convinced that's the way to go. So they say, use our book, but don't make a profit on it. Okay? Use it as you wish. We also have, here's just to show you, we have a commitment to less commonly taught languages, so we're trying to do the same thing in Yoruba, which is a Nigerian language. But they have, the point is, there are different materials that have different licenses. And then we're discussing which license is more appropriate. We're talking about our own lenses. I was talking about a lens, a group of people to do quality control, where there, this didn't come out very well, but there are various lenses or open educational archives, resource archives. Merlot is one of the biggest. Merlot.org, please go and visit it. This is a consortium, community colleges, OERs. It's taking off in community colleges, not really in a place like the University of Texas, but ACC, they know about it. CollegeOpenTextbooks.org is another archive, or could be a lens. Another lens could be then the teacher organizations, American Association of Teachers of whatever, French here, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever the language, they have an association. They could be our lens and talk about quality control for this. ACTFL itself could be a lens. And finally, to be on the absolute bleeding edge, I mentioned at the beginning of the talk all these different processes because they're not just products. Even though I'm holding up things, this to me is a process because it took a long time and had a lot of people So now, textbooks, as I like to say, are not nouns, they're verbs. They're verbs. So coming back to credentialing, really a lot of this is about online, more informal, more open structures for learning, and we need to have a way of showing that you've learned something. There is something new. Okay, I asked open education. Who's heard of open badges? Okay, good. So you haven't. All right. This is a very new idea, and it is gaining traction. You can see the MacArthur Foundation with Mozilla has come up with this idea of giving people credit for what they learn online in informal settings, and it's called badges. And we're running out of time, so maybe I'll just kind of go quickly in with that. If questions, I can talk to you more about badges. One of it is that I read around, and one of the people I'm reading right now is Clay Shirky. He is a new media studies professor at NYU. He's published a book last year called Cognitive Surplus. And he has a very felicitous phrase that I really like. He's talking about design for generosity. So yes, the internet can be used for spam and porn, but it also can be used for creating really amazing materials if we can come together and create something for the common good. So read this book. It's a plug, a shameless plug for this terrific book, Creativity and Generosity in a Connected Age. That to me really is fundamentally what open education is all about. So we're in challenging times, particularly in foreign languages. They're cutting our budgets, and materials are expensive, and people are having a hard time. But it's the worst of times, it's the best of times. The main idea is that education then is this ecosystem. We at CORE are committed to making sure that everyone has access to our materials, and what we want to work on more is that we have insights from the crowd. Thank you very much.